Greetings, Jackson. This is Joan Palliser walking through Chapter 2, How Schools Foster Resiliency in Students. This is going to be through our book study, Resiliency in Schools, Making It Happen for Students and Educators. Questions to consider during this chapter. Number 1, how do we build resiliency in students? Again, in Chapter 1, we took a look at what resiliency is and what it looks like, the different characteristics. And now we're going to go a little bit closer scoped in on what it looks like with students. Number 2, what am I already doing that is a form of resiliency in the classroom? Again, developing those self-reflection practices. And that leads us into Chapter 3. How can I be more effective in developing resiliency practices in my classroom? Again, building on our self-reflection understanding of the text and considering these questions as we study this chapter. 2 themes that came out of this chapter on page 17 for resiliency building attitude is caring and personalization. This ties into the importance of developing relationships and creating an environment that allows students to feel accepted, motivated, and comforted. Some research to support that coming from Dr. Monica Myers. Throughout the data, a consistent thread occurred from both adult and student participants, indicating that when a teacher cares about students, the students tend to feel connected to their environment, whether it be in the classroom, school programs, clubs, activities, or athletics. Many of the teachers that students identified as caring also served as their confidant and trusted adult. And again, teacher as a broad term, more as a role model. Some other research to support these themes is in personalization. A key component of improving schooling environments has been improving personalization, that is, tightening connections between students and their learning environments, e.g., teachers, other adults, student peers, curriculum, overall school culture. Personalization matters because young people who are engaged emotionally, cognitively, and behaviorally in their education are less likely to show signs of alienation and more likely to be connected to school. Students who feel connected to their school are more likely to exhibit healthy lifestyle behaviors. So increased school connectedness is also related to educational motivation, classroom engagement, and better attendance, all of which are linked to higher academic achievement. These themes come out as an attitude that says, I believe you can make it. You are at promise rather than at risk. So we focus and we understand that the student's strengths in order to help develop their individual learning approaches and success. Some other research that's out there on the ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences, coming from our Ohio stats here from 2018. Here you'll see 0 ACEs at 51%, 1 ACEs is at 23%, 2 ACEs is at 13%, and 3 to 8 ACEs is at 15%. And you'll notice the 3 to 8 ACEs is highlighted in yellow because I marked it that way to show that it's higher than the national average here in Ohio. Now, just to refresh your memory, ACEs, again, is Adverse Childhood Experiences. There are 8 of them. I'll just list them off here real quick just to kind of recall. Number 1, lived with a parent or guardian who became divorced or separated. Number 2, lived with a parent or guardian who died. Number 3, lived with a parent or guardian who served time in jail or prison. Number 4, lived with anyone who was mentally ill or suicidal or severely depressed more than a couple of weeks. Number 5, lived with anyone who had a problem with alcohol or drug. Number 6, witnessed a parent, guardian, or other adult in the household behaving violently towards another, e.g. slapping, hitting, kicking, punching, or beating each other up. Number 7, been the victim of violence or witnessed any violence in his or her neighborhood. And number 8, experienced economic hardship somewhat often or very often, i.e. the family found it hard to cover costs of food and housing. Now, again, as we take a look at the fulcrum of resiliency, and you can see these as risk factors, with all students developing resiliency, we want to make sure we consider the personalization and the caring to all those who have various experiences. So we want to look for student strengths with the same meticulousness that is usually used to uncover student problems and mirror those strengths of students. So again, to ward against the risk factors and to build that resiliency, we want to mirror strengths and create that positive environment. And one activity you can practice and do in your classroom to give extra tools and resources is make a list of your students or write each student on an index card. Then identify one strength for each student next to their name. After you write them, take some time to give the written strength to your students or verbalize them individually and intermittently. So it has a more casual flow to it, but it also shows that personalization. Now, this is again to capture identified and unidentified skills, talents, or characteristics each student might display. So, again, we're trying to pull out their strengths, identify them as individual strengths, and let them know some of the skills that maybe they're not even aware of. The most critical resiliency builder for every student is the basic trusting relationship, even with just one adult within the family or without that says you matter. Now, there are a lot of family members that are known as those trusted, supported adults in resiliency, but the school can be that and other factors within their lives. But we do want to make sure that we consider all options to building our resiliency with our students. Taking a look again at that resiliency wheel and those 6 parts to it, the increased pro-social bonding, set clear, consistent boundaries, teach life skills, provide caring and support, set and communicate high expectations, and provide opportunities for meaningful participation. The resiliency is also built in students by creating school environments characterized by the 6 resiliency building factors introduced in Chapter 1. So if we consider that and taking a look at the resiliency wheel and the mitigation and the building development of it, in short, resiliency is built in students by one-to-one interactions that convey optimism and a strength focus, and by encountering the 6 resiliency factors in the structure, teaching strategies, and programs in the school organization. So again, we want to incorporate these in our programs. We want to incorporate these in our teaching practices. We want to develop students who are resilient, and we want to develop resiliency in the regular practices that we do with our students. So what are some barriers that might impede the process of resiliency, and what do they look like? There's 4 main barriers that are identified on pages 19 to 20. Controversy over the role of school in the lives of students. Again, the disagreements of who is the official stakeholders in developing resiliency practices in students. Number 2, perceived time limitations. Again, developing that time to build those relationships and that personalization. Number 3, sheer size of schools, students getting lost in the mix and having larger classroom sizes or larger building sizes. And then number 4, absence of specific resiliency fostering teaching strategies, school and classroom organization, and programs of prevention and intervention. So having those resources readily available to you and having different trainings with that. So adults also felt that the size of the research site, the high school, affected connectedness and climate. So with a group that can be nearly 20 or 2,000 students, it can be challenging to ensure every student is connected in some way. When students are connected to their teachers and their peers, they are comfortable in their environment. So we want to make aware, if we do have a larger size student population, how can we build and develop these personalization characteristics and this caring attitude? Well, by fostering resiliency is more about people-to-people interactions than about programs. Programs can be important and they support the teachers and students, but it's important to note that the way and who is using the program also allows for its success. So again, the teacher resiliency attitude helps create success with the support of programs and curricular resources. So looking on the right, you can see the 6 resiliency wheel parts. And again, on the left, the greatest hope is overcoming these barriers lies in educators with attitudes that reflect the 6 resiliency building factors included on the resiliency wheel. So developing that increase in pro-social bonding, developing that set clear, consistent boundaries, developing teaching life skills, providing caring and support, set and communicating those high expectations, and again, providing opportunities for meaningful participation. It's the passion for helping students to be resilient and added to the knowledge from resiliency literature and developing in that growth that is a driving force behind overcoming barriers to resiliency building. So again, reminder that resiliency is a lifelong process, and it involves a network of people and communities and stakeholders being supported and supporting our students. So what does it look like in the primary school? There are some different themes that came out from pages 22 to 24. The rights and responsibilities in developing those, taking active involvement, the incentives. Remember, incentives don't need to be physical, tangible. They can be verbal. Work expectations, engagement, hugs and smiles. Again, affection, verbal affirmation, or a little physical comfort pat on the back. Communication, behaviors. Again, reminding student handbook, developing appropriate resiliency building character attitudes, all these things. And with all these different things, how they look, considering stakeholders and collaborating with one of them. So what does it look like in secondary school? Again, there's examples on pages 24 to 25 that go into more detail, but looking at collaboration between students and staff and modeling that collaboration, cooperation, and developing opportunities with resiliency wheel factors, active engagement and experience in taking responsibility for their own learning, coaching them and being that guide on the side, encouraging them, giving them affirmation, and giving them a sense of success and achievement in what they do. So, what does it look like for students on the resiliency wheel? On page 30 here, it goes a little bit more in detail what it looks like for students. So if you were looking at your book on page 30, you can see a little bit of a profile characteristics that goes around how it's making sure and finding those details. Now, I point these out because these are things to kind of read through and focus in on and see if there's any areas that you can build or develop more, or that you can see opportunities to help grow with others and with yourself. Connections to school culture. We want to develop a culture that's guiding beliefs and values that are evident in a way of how school operates. So we want to have these attitudes, these values, these strengths that support. So again, you can see these different words or this lingo that kind of goes with school culture. Like you want to build trust, you want to build knowledge, you want to build the rigor and the attitudes and the connections and the change. All of these factors come together. A quote that's always resonated with me as I consider school culture and working with students is from Maya Angelou. It says that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And so how you make students feel, that personalization, that caring attitude, that support, and how we support one another as a staff and how we encourage each other as a team effort can really make a huge difference and can really come out in a positive school culture. So recapturing the questions to consider from this chapter, again, kind of culminating those three questions that we looked at. How do we build resiliency in students? And what should resiliency look like in my or our classrooms? So again, as a community, as staff coming together, what does it look like? Now, for your assignment on the LPDC, read and complete, there's a resiliency teacher reflection tool. There's going to be some different questions just to kind of ask yourself and reflect on what would my students think. Again, we're not going to give these questions to students, but it's used as a reflection of what would my students say or think about this. So as you're reflecting on that, and then I will work with you on chapter 3 next.